Hello weirdos, welcome back to my channel. My name is EmmaAbe, and if I sound a little bit different, that's because I'm wearing my retainer, because I was an idiot and didn't wear it for a long time. So wear your retainers when you have to, because I have to wear mine all the time except when I'm eating or brushing my teeth. So that's why I might sound a little bit lispy today, but hopefully we won't have to be wearing this longer than the next 2 weeks. Anyway, the schedule for today's video, what we're going to be talking about today is, well, we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in January of 2022. I am very excited. I had a pretty good reading month. I got a lot of books done. I read a total of 16 books. That is partially because a week in January, I really didn't have school. And then we had online school for 2 weeks. So it was weird. And now I'm back in school in person. So let's talk about the 16 books that I actually did read. The first one is Lincoln and Medicine. This is by Glenna R. Schroeder-Stein. And I quite enjoyed this book. This is one of the books that I had on my Lincoln shelf that I hadn't actually really read. I got it from my aunt. She was moving houses and she knew I liked Abraham Lincoln, so she gave me a bunch of her Lincoln books, and this was one of them. And I finally got around to reading it, and you know what? I thought it was quite enjoyable. I will say though that you kind of have to know a lot about Lincoln's life to kind of understand what is happening, because he jumps from events to events very, very quickly, and he doesn't really give a lot of background. At least the author doesn't. Wasn't really a problem for me because I knew exactly everything that the author was talking about, so it was no problem. I liked how short it was. I think it was about 100 pages, and I don't really think you needed to go longer than that because there really aren't a lot of medical mysteries that there are with the Lincolns. That's just kind of how it works out. I did like that it touched a little bit on Mary and her grieving process. Mary Lincoln just went through so much grief, and oh God, I could not imagine a grief of living beyond 3 of her 4 children and then losing her husband. And yeah, it's so much, and I could not imagine being in her shoes. I will say that also this book eviscerates the idea of Lincoln being gay, which I find to be very funny. Yeah, the author basically says that if we are basing someone's gayness by who they share a bed with, meaning who they actually sleep, nothing sexual with, then most of the men in the 1800s would be gay, because a lot of the instances that people point to Lincoln being gay were sleeping with men. It's just were mostly out of convenience. I found that very entertaining. Yeah, and it's just it was a cute little romp if you want to learn more about what are the probabilities of Lincoln having all of these different diseases that or stuff that medical afflictions that go along with him. I found it really interesting and an enjoyable read. But I'm a Lincoln nerd, so take that with a grain of salt. The next book I read was Heartstopper, Volume 4. This is by Alice Oseman, and it's just as cute as the other 3 volumes. I don't really know what else to say about it. I like that mental health really does take a front seat in this book. In the edition that I read, there was a cute little series of vignettes at the end that were going through the relationship that 2 of the teacher had, and it was all focused on first. So it was the first night over, the first kiss, all of these first things, and that was really cute. And I quite enjoyed that. Yeah, I highly recommend it. If you are at all thinking about picking up the Heartstopper books, give it a try. They are so cute and so worth it, in my opinion. The next book I read was Becoming RBG. This is by Debbie Levy. This one was cute too. It's a children's book, which I guess I should have known going into this, but it's also a graphic novel. Yeah, I think it does a really good job defining things that small children might have a little bit difficult get difficulty like understanding, like stuff like Roe versus Wade and what the Supreme Court is. And yeah, I think it is a cute little book that goes through Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life, and I enjoyed it. I don't really have a bunch to say about it, but yeah, it was cute. The next book I read was The Lost Apothecary. This is by Sarah Penner. I think that's how you pronounce that, but I'm not entirely sure. I wanted to really like this book. I like the concept of it. I don't know if it works 100% together. That being said, I didn't hate it. It just was kind of a meh for me. So what this is about is you have this apothecary will murder men, will only murder men, and basically does the work of like for women. So if someone's husband is cheating, or if a man raped your friend, all of these things, this apothecary is kind of doing the work that women have to do throughout history to protect themselves. And I think that was a pretty interesting look on it. I felt like they could have gone more into that fact, and the fact that why women have to go to this apothecary is because the government and like the law enforcement just does not take their needs and their problems seriously. And in that way, I felt like the book was a lot lighter than it could have been. So that's like kind of the overarching plot, but we're following 3 different characters. So we're following the actual apothecary, and then we're following this 12-year-old girl who befriends the apothecary woman, and then we're also following this other woman in modern times who is a little bit lost. She's just found out that her husband was cheating on her. She flies to England because that was supposed to be their anniversary thing, and she discovers the apothecary. And I felt like the 2 storylines don't really come together very well. I say 2 because the 2 in the past, the apothecary and the 12-year-old girl, don't really that. They tell the same story. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that 3 voices were needed. I don't know. I thought it was meh. I wanted to like it more than I did, because I thought the cover was super cute, super gorgeous, and I think I just wanted a little bit more depth to this book than it gave me. I will say, though, the modern woman, I forget her name, I totally think that she should move to England and get together with that librarian and figure out that she's queer, because that is the ending that I want to this story. And I'm very glad that she dropped her fucking husband, because he was a scumbag and I did not like him at all. Very, very manipulative too. Yeah, so that's that one. The next book that I read is The Mosquito by Timothy C. Weingard. And I thought this book was going to be a little bit different than what it was. I thought it was going to be a lot more science-based, and just talking about the mosquito and the specific diseases that have afflicted humans because of mosquitoes. But that's not really what it is. It's really a look at the history of mosquito-borne diseases. And I found it really, really interesting. I think that the author does a really good job at that. One thing that I thought was cool is that he was referencing some of the books that I had read in the past. He referenced 1493, which I haven't read that, but I did read 1491, and I thought that to be interesting. I have a few little nitpicky things about this book. I think he downplays the expansiveness of Native American societies a little bit. He kind of falls into the trap of thinking that they are smaller than they were, and they didn't have as much of an impact on the land, that they didn't grow to be the societies that they were. And that was disappointing to me, because he referenced 1493, and in 1491 that is specifically debunked by that author. And that was just a tiny nitpick for me, but other than that, I thought it was a really, really, really interesting look, and it had a very nice scope. It didn't just focus on the history of Europe. It talked about like all over, basically, like Africa, Mongolia, Asia, the Americas. So I very much appreciated that broad scope. I don't really know what else to say about the book. It's a good book. I quite enjoyed it, but it's one of those history things that I like. The next book that I read is El Escorial by the editors of Charles River. And this is a book that I bought in Spain when I went to Spain. I actually went to go see El Escorial. It was one of the things that I really wanted to do when I was in Madrid. I begged my host family to take me, and they did, and it was really cool. I wanted to go because I just learned about it the year previously in my AP Euro history class. Yeah, it was really cool. And I bought it, actually not there, I bought it when I went to the Palacio Real. How did I actually feel about this book? This is like one of those books that are very touristy baby, but like I don't really care, because I just wanted to like learn more about like El Escorial and the architecture stuff. It didn't go into like as much depth as I wanted it to, but also how much depth can you go into? Because it really was like Philip's second like passion project, and he really wanted this palace to be a reflection of his religious piety and the vision he wanted for the country that didn't really wind up working. And I think that's very much reflected in the vast majority of the building is devoted to religious studies and being a convent/monastery, and the actual rooms that himself and his family would have lived in were very, very, very small in comparison to other people at the time. And the same goes with the gardens. It's very much in contrast to the Sun King's idea of really like owning the landscape and making the landscape conform to their will. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. It was quite interesting. The next book that I read is A Furious Sky, this by Eric J. Dolan. This is a book that is all about hurricanes and the history of hurricanes and how hurricanes were like detected and how do we prevent mass disasters. And often it is told through like mass disasters, like depictions of mass disasters. And there was just a lot. I knew that hurricanes were very destructive, but the amount of human suffering and loss and the just devastation that a hurricane can wake, and the high level stakes that goes into predicting hurricanes and making sure that everybody is safe. It's just a lot. And I wasn't expecting that much out of it. There was a chapter on the Galveston hurricane in Texas and how it just devastated the community. And like I'd heard of this hurricane before. Actually, a family friend who's a singer-songwriter wrote a song all about it, and I was just like getting very emotional because it for many reasons when I was reading that chapter, because of the depictions of the just the devastation, and then me thinking about like that song. It was just a lot. I found it really interesting that a lot of the mass disasters and why the warnings didn't go out were a lot due to, honestly, like human hubris or the lack of communication between different like countries, and especially with like America and Cuba, because this did have a very, very concentrated scope on American hurricanes, and that's in the subtitle of the book, so that's not a problem in my opinion because you disclose that. I guess one thing that like I would have liked a little bit more is to maybe hear a little bit more about the pre-contact hurricanes. I'm not sure if the data is out there for that, because it really is really focused on post-contact. And I mean, even if there was like a small chapter in the beginning where it would have talked about how people had handled it. I don't know. It's just my thought. And I think at the end, it was really cool too, because they talked a little bit about how hurricane prediction is happening now, what are the new technologies and new strategies, and the new problems that arise because people just don't take hurricanes seriously, which is sad. So that's that one. The next book that I read is The Downstairs Girl by Stacy Lee. This is about a young girl. She is Chinese American. She lives with an older gentleman, like an old man, who she kind of views as like an uncle, a father figure almost. They are living under this print shop because they are living in Georgia, in Atlanta, during the Reconstruction era. So it's not really legal for Asian Americans to own land or rent or really own a job. So a lot of what the main character goes through is being a young woman in this era and trying to find a job, trying to like put food on the table. I really appreciate this book for what it does, which is like bringing a not often viewpoint that is seen in American history, and that being of a Chinese American and what is that like, and putting it in a historical context, because oftentimes those stories aren't told. So I really liked that aspect of it. That being said, I think the book is a little bit too slow for my taste. I would have preferred something a little bit more fast-paced than what we got, because it takes like a while for like the plot to really start to pick up and for the blurb that's promised on the back to happen. And that blurb being that this Chinese American girl she sees at the print shop. Girl, she's like 17, she's practically an adult. But the print shop that she lives under, they run this newspaper, and this newspaper is going to be closed down upon. They're gonna lose, like they're gonna shut down if they don't get like 400 new subscriptions in the next month. So what she decides to do is run this like advice column that's like mainly catered towards like young women, because there's not a lot of newspapers that are talking about women's issues. And so I thought that that was pretty interesting. And I do really like what the conversations that are happening surrounding like race and privilege and being this a person of color in a time where people are very much thinking in black and white. I just wish that there was a little bit more meat on the bones of this book. I do find the mystery to be very interesting. I don't really want to tell you what the mystery is, and I was kind of like blown away by the answer. It's a personal opinion. I would have preferred something a little bit more fast-paced. Anyway, the next book that I read is All's Well by Mona Award. This I read as like my choice for the Goodreads Choice Awards for the horror section. I had a misconception about this book. I thought they were going to be putting on the Scottish play, but they don't. They actually perform All's Well That Ends Well, which is another Shakespeare play. This tells a story about a theater director who is in chronic pain, who is just not really taken seriously by much of anybody. She is walked all over by some of her students, especially this one particular student who is very, very wealthy, and like her father is like donates a lot to the theater program, so she essentially gets whatever she wants. Her best friend doesn't really like is kind of her friend. That her doctors don't really believe her or trust her about the pain that she is going through. And this book was like very frustrating book to read, because like how much pain that she was in and how the frustration that she was having with her doctors and them not listening to her. And that's kind of where the horror comes from, is the horror comes from her quest to be taken seriously and to not feel pain. Yeah, there are supernatural elements in this book, but I think that where this book gets away with that for me is that it is written in stream of consciousness. So it's all told from the perspective of the main character. It's all her thoughts in her head. You could very easily argue that these things are just not happening. She is just diving into insanity. That is why. And a lot of the off-puttingness of it is a lot through her inner dialogue. And like what she's saying, what she is thinking. And yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. It was a little bit different than what I was expecting it to be, but I still did wind up enjoying it a fair amount. The next book that I read is The Sixth Extinction. This is by Elizabeth Colbert. This is about extinction. So there is a portion of the book that talks about the past extinctions that we've gone through and what has led to those extinctions. But there is another portion of the book that talks about our current period right now that we are in and the massive levels of extinctions that are happening due to humans and climate change and all of that stuff. It was a very, very informative book. It was a lot. There was a lot to take in. It was very, very sciencey, and I liked it for those reasons. It also was a little bit scary because, the fact that we're in a major extinction level event and we kind of aren't acknowledging it is a little bit wild. It was also pretty good, but I don't really know what else to say about it. The next book I read is Sky Burial by Xin Ran. I see it as, if you've read the book The Good Women of China, which is like her most famous book, it very much reads as like a story, like an expanded story from that book. I think that makes sense because it's by the same author, but I feel like it could have definitely fit into that book. But the story is just wild that it kind of does deserve a book of its own. And this one's also shorter too. I think it's less than 200 pages. Basically, it tells this story of a young Chinese woman. This is before the Cultural Revolution, so in like the 40s, her husband goes off to Tibet to fight in the Chinese army who are fighting with the Tibetans. But she doesn't hear back from him for a while. So in the quest to find her husband, this young woman signs up to the Chinese army. She goes to Tibet, actually winds up getting separated from the rest of her regiment. And she's going as a doctor. And her husband was also a doctor. And so she gets separated and spends like 40 years trying to find her husband before ultimately returning to China. And since she was in Tibet and she was living with the Tibetan people, she doesn't really know like at all what's happening. And along the way, she makes friends with this Tibetan woman who is also looking for not her husband, but the love of her life, who was lost. And it was just wild, man. The stuff that the two of them went through, it's just an astonishing like story. And it's almost like unbelievable. And I don't want to give anything else away. I really enjoyed it. I was just like towards those ending chapters, I was very, very, very much flabbergasted. And yeah, I quite enjoyed that. It was another one. I don't think I enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Good Women of China, but it was still a really good one by Xin Ran. The next book that I read is The First Sister. This is by Lyndon? Yeah, we're gonna go with Lyndon Lewis. This is a sci-fi story where you have like two major factions. I don't really remember the like factionless names, but they're in massive conflict with each other. One of them is a very pro-tech society, so every human has like implants and like neural links, do all this different genetic engineering, and they have like they've fully like embraced technology. The other society, which is kind of the society of Earth and Mars, they don't. And you're following three main storylines. So you're following the storyline of this woman who is a sister. The sisterhood is like a religious organization that are all over, and they are the predominant religion of the tech-phobic people, and they are really prided on being very natural and very beautiful women, and they serve as like prostitutes and preachers. So they are supposed to be at the beck and call for anyone's like sexual desire, but they're also the people who are supposed to be the people who the regular people confess to their sins and their feelings, and they have a direct link with the like goddess person that they worship, which is very, very interesting. And so you follow a sister who's the first sister on this ship. And another thing with the sisters is that they cannot speak. Then you're also following a soldier who is on the pro-tech people's side. He is reeling because he was just in a giant battle. He lost his partner, who he was neurally connected to, so they could feel each other's feelings, they could talk to each other in their minds, and they, like, grew up together. So he thinks that his partner is dead, and he doesn't really, like, he's, like, reeling from it, and he gets this new assignment, and he gets a new partner, and their assignment is to go to the tech-phobic people and kill the head of the sisterhood. That is his job. The last person that you're following is actually a series of recordings, and it is from the perspective of the partner that is dead. And so he made these recordings before he went into his last big battle, and he's kind of revealing to you why he was seen as a traitor by the pro-tech people aside. And, you know, I really, really enjoyed this. I like getting to know the different people and learning more about this world. I'm going to be very interested to see where the second book in this series goes, because it ends with a major upset, and, like, oh my god. It almost winds up being like a little bit of a love triangle there a little bit at the end, but like also not really, because they're also just like, we're in a massive battle. I mean, this is not the biggest priority. I really enjoyed that, and I am very interested to read the next one, which I think is called The First Rebel or something like that, or The Second Rebel. I'm not really sure. Anyway, moving on to the next book I read, which is Come From Away, Welcome to the Rock. This is by Irene Sankoff. And this is one of those books that's kind of like Hamilton the Revolution, which talks about the making of said musical. So it is about the making of Come From Away, and y'all know I love Come From Away. I freaking love that musical so much. A pro shot of it was put on Apple TV Plus, and my parents happened to have it. So in the span of a month and a half, I watched Come From Away 3 times. I cried every single time like a motherfucking baby, because yes. Yeah, I tend to really, really enjoy these kinds of books because I like learning about the process. I liked learning about what was the process of the staging, how did they find the actors, how did they decide to incorporate the stories. And I think this is really cool because they put interviews of the people who went through the events of 9/11, put their stories in the book as well. And so if you don't know, Come From Away is about 9/11, but it's very smartly done because it's not about the actual Twin Towers. It is about 38 planes that were forced to land in Newfoundland. And in Newfoundland, it doesn't have a huge population, and especially the town that was right by the airport, which is the town of Gander. And Gander is like very small town of about 7,000 people, and all of a sudden they have 7,000 people arriving on 38 different planes, and the town size doubles, and they have to figure out, how do we navigate all these different people and navigate this massive crisis that is happening in the world. And I just love it so much. I was talking to my cousin recently, and they were like, yeah, no, I can't love Come From Away because my parents would not shut up about Come From Away. And I was like, I don't really know why. I assumed that they saw it or something like that. And I told my cousin, I told her, I was like, yeah, that was me. I made them go see Come From Away with me. I was like, I am the reason for your pain. Yeah, so I have great love for it. Come From Away, Welcome to the Rock has, just like many other of these books do, they have the script and the, songs written out, and there are footnotes where the author can detail things like, oh, this is the inspiration for this line, or I really like the staging on this line, and I always really like those kinds of things. And what I tend to do with those portions, I will pause the audiobook and I will listen to the audio and follow along, but this time they really did put the whole script in there, So you can't just listen to the soundtrack. You have to like watch the show and follow along. In my opinion, I freaking cried when I was reading this book. It was a lot. It was very, very, very emotional. I started reading it and I was like, Mom, I'm gonna cry. And she was like, yes, you are. And I did. The next book that I read was Butterfly Swords by Janie Lin. This is a steamy romance novel. I didn't really know that going in, but yes, it is. It is a historical romance. It is set in the Tang Dynasty, asterisk. I say that because there's nothing really specific Tang Dynasty about it. It very much could have been set in any time in ancient China, or just in China's history where there are dynasties. And yeah, I didn't appreciate that aspect of it so much, but, well, in terms of the unspecificity of the Tang Dynasty specificity of it. I actually quite enjoyed this book. I had a lot of fun reading it. I was just gobbling it up. It was the kind of high stakes that I like in my romance. You have this main character, Aili. It actually opens with her in the red palanquin, and she is on her way to marry a man that she does not want to marry, but she is forced to marry because of political alliances. And she knows that this man killed her brother. We don't really know, like, at the start who exactly she is. We know that she is, like, a daughter of a wealthy family, and that's about all we know. So she escapes from this marriage. She, like, runs away from the palanquin, and because she wants to go and tell her father and her family that this person that she was going to marry is, like, a terrible person. And along the way, she runs into this barbarian. So it's a total, like, princess and barbarian, like, trope. And I quite enjoyed it. And this barbarian was all like, oh, everybody hates me, nobody really likes me, like, I'm a foreigner, I'm an outsider. He helps her make her way back to her family. And what I really appreciated about this book is that she gets to her family, like, well before the halfway mark, and the rest of the book is just them navigating the fact of, do we want to be together? How does that look like? And does that mean that you come with me or I go with you? Like, how does that work? Which I really, really appreciated. The thing that I really appreciate, another thing that I really liked about this book is that it kind of flips the barbarian princess trope a little bit on its head. And maybe that's just because I don't read a lot of, like, this kind of romance. But typically what I've seen is that the barbarian in this situation is usually a person of color. Doesn't have to be, but when there is a person of color in these types of romances, it's usually a barbarian, and their culture is often seen as, like, seen as weird and barbaric. It's not always the case, but from my understanding, that tends to be the case. Whereas the other person, which is usually a white person, that's not how their culture is portrayed. But in this book, the barbarian culture is like Italian culture. We don't exactly know where this barbarian is from, where the man is from. We just know he is from somewhere around the Mediterranean Sea, and he was there because he was a soldier, and he's, like, fighting in wars that are happening in like along the Silk Road. And so his culture is very framed as very other, and the Chinese culture is very much viewed as very normal, and it's talked about and being like being as the a more normalized culture. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really, really thought that was really refreshing to read in a story that could have gone the other way. I thought it was cute. I liked it. That was actually a rec from the story graph, and I'm very glad I read it. The next book is The Crown of Gilded Bones. This is by Jennifer R. Armentrout. This is the third book in the From Blood and Ash series. And oh my god, this book is so much better than the second book, which is not saying something because I did not really like the second book. I just think the stakes in this one are a lot higher. We are learning a lot more, a lot faster. Things are actually happening. There's actually consequences. The two main characters wind up getting separated by the end of this book. And it's really, really hard to like explain like what is happening in this book, because you kind of have to read the other 2 books in the book, and I don't really want to give any spoilers. I think that this book also suffers with some of the issues that I had with the first and second book. With that being said, that it is too long. It does not need to be 600 pages. Sorry, that's just my opinion. I hate to say it, but I don't really think you need the second book. I mean, you kind of do, but I think that the second book you could have split it into this one or the first one, and it would have worked. I think this is the one that I like the most in the series, because you have the main character, Poppy. She is gaining a lot of the agency that she has. She's growing a lot into her powers, figuring out exactly who she is and her place in this world. She doesn't quite have it all figured out yet, but I think that's pretty cool. We just get a lot of reveals in this book, and it's just wow. Yeah, and I feel like I can't really say anything else about this book. The very last book that I read this in January is The Girl from the Sea. This is by Molly Knox Ostereg. I don't know how you pronounce that. This was cute. This is a sapphic romance between a Selkie and a human. Yeah, it's very like small in comparison to a lot of the other books that I'm reading. Like, small as in scope. You know, it really takes place over a couple of days. You are dealing with teenagers who are young and dumb and like meeting each other and just being totally awed by like one another and falling in love. And main character, I forget her name, but she's the human in the pair. She is grappling with the fact that she is a lesbian and what does it mean for her family, her friends. She doesn't really think that she's going to be accepted, so she tries to hide her relationship with this Selkie, and stuff goes down there from there. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cute. This was the one that I read for my choice of the Goodreads Choice Awards winners, and this was in the running for the graphic novel section. And yeah, I thought it was pretty cute. I don't really have much else to say about it. So there you go. Those are my books that I read in January. I hope you guys had an awesome reading month, and I hope that 2022 is treating you well in terms of reading. Hopefully we can all get through this year intact, and hopefully COVID gets better. But let me know, what did you guys think of the books that I read? What was your favorite book that you read in January? Let me know. Give a comment, subscribe, and do all of the good YouTube things. All right, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.